Hey, it's me again. It's Rob Ryan, back with another episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And I have to say, I don't know that there's anybody out there who would think that we could solve the healthcare crisis or crack the market for healthcare provision, health insurance, how they all relate in the US. It is such a terribly broken system. Everybody understands it. Everybody outside the US knows that we have a terribly broken system. Everybody inside the US lives through it. And I just had a conversation where I got to marry two of my great passions in life. My love for deep, complex problems, sometimes societal level problems, governmental level problems, institutional issues, with my love for Mexican innovation and Mexican innovators. I got to have a conversation today with Bismarck Lepe, famously in Mexico, CEO, founder of Uyala, famously in Mexico, CEO, founder of Wiseline, huge empresario, as they would say, a great friend, and a real advocate of the potential between the cross-border, cross-cultural potential in North America between the Mexican entrepreneurial economy and Mexican engineering students and talent, and the U.S. economy and all of our needs and opportunities. And we had a conversation about MiSalud Health, which is his new company attacking exactly this healthcare opportunity. As he said, unabashedly so, he is chasing solutions inside the $5 trillion US healthcare market. And he is off to an incredible start with MiSalud Health. So we talk all about that. We talk about MiSalud's unique early success stories inside of the community of immigrant laborers, field labor, industrial laborers here in the United States and California specifically, where they built some of their pilot MVP product, and then how it's already grown and expanded and where he sees it going. And we have this conversation kind of in the joyful spirit of two friends talking about stuff they love, which is Mexico, innovation, entrepreneurial thinking, the entrepreneurial economies of North America. And I think you'll really enjoy this conversation as much as we did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not know, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry today. As my mom used to say, as we come together to try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Today, we've got an incredible guest in this context of trying to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. I'm really grateful to be joined by my friend from Mexico via San Francisco, Bismarck Lepe, CEO of MiSalud Health, and CEO and founder of a whole bunch of other stuff, which we'll touch on and talk about as we get into the show. But we're really here to talk about MiSalud Health and its story today. But let me tell you a little bit about Bismarck before we introduce him and welcome him to the show. He's played the game of scale, using technology and business like a grandmaster in the United States, Mexico, and the world. From Google to Uyala to founding Wiseline, one of the pioneers of outsourced global software development in Mexico, a man who has spearheaded the growth of Mexico's most vibrant entrepreneurial economy, in my opinion, in Guadalajara, Jalisco, to now reshaping real-time digital healthcare access for working-class people cross-border with MiSalud Health. He doesn't just build company, he builds ecosystems. He helps build startup communities. He helps build cities. He champions our cross-border, cross-cultural economic opportunity that everybody knows I'm so passionate about. And now he is even rethinking how we work and heal. He's been in the boardrooms of billion-dollar decisions and the back rooms of bold ideas, but it's really the roots of his upbringing and his life story which continue to shape how he uses his time, his talents, and his resources to, as I already said, try to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. He has managed to find a way to combine passion and the desire to leave the world a little bit better with opportunity. And there's always a massive opportunity to attach to whatever it is that he finds his way to work on. Beyond all that, most importantly, really at the end of the day, though, he is a loving and doting father to an incredible family. He's a great life partner, a brother, and a son. And to me, he's, again, a longtime friend from a distance. Please welcome who I believe to be one of the best entrepreneurial thinkers of our era and a real builder of bridges and a better world, my friend, Bismarck Lepe. Bismarck, welcome.
Rob, my God, I'm getting teary-eyed, and I think I'm gonna record that or have my kids listen to it. Like they
That's
definitely
it.
don't find me impressive.
That's it. That's you, buddy. That's you. It's I said it's easy to sing the praises of good people who are doing good things.
Oh, good. Really glad to be here.
No, it's a pleasure. We got a lot to talk about. Maybe a little bit different than some podcast appearances that I've seen you on over the years. This is a little bit less of just the like, hey, how have you been wildly successful over the course of your career story? And it's really more focused on this company of yours, MiSalud Health. So I want to start with kind of this super open, wide question for you is, and we'll get into what MiSalud Health is in a minute, but first and foremost, like, why is MiSalud so important right now?
Well, I think healthcare is always important. I consider health along the lines as like housing, food, education as an inalienable right, and especially in a place like America, like it should be an expectation that you have access to healthcare and high quality healthcare. But the reality is that 38% of Americans live in healthcare deserts, and about 80% of Hispanics live in healthcare deserts. And that became incredibly obvious to us during the pandemic when, if you're Hispanic, you're 4 times more likely to die of COVID, 3 times more likely to end up in the hospital, twice as likely to get COVID. And as we dug into it, we realized that it was an access issue, and access on a couple of fronts. One, it was the access because there are just fewer healthcare facilities for Hispanics. Second, an access issue around language. So 43 million Americans would prefer to conduct their lives in Spanish, but less than 1% of physicians actually speak Spanish. And the third is cost. And so as we looked at this issue, we wondered if there was a way for us to take the Wiseline business model of having talented people offer their services to people in another place, and here would be doctors to offer their services in the US. They couldn't practice medicine, but we found a model that did work, and we've seen phenomenal results.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAS.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. So let's do this. Just tell us about the company. Like, what is? Give it. This is your commercial. Like, what is it? What does it do? How does it get access? Who's the customer, et cetera?
So we at MiSalud are bridging or merging technology and nearshore talent in the healthcare space to make healthcare more accessible. And so what we do is we have physicians in Mexico who act as health coaches. And through the MiSalud app, that's usually provided by the benefits department at an employer, people have access to MiSalud Health. And about 90 to 95% of consults start and end with the health coaches that are based in Mexico. 5 to 10% of the consults are escalated to our physicians that are in the US, that are licensed physicians in the state that the person that is in. If, for example, you need a prescription, labs, or you need to see someone in person. And so given that 90 to 95% of the consults start and end in Mexico, we are able to keep the overall cost of care significantly lower than all of the alternatives around.
Wow. Who had the idea, like the seed of this MiSalud Health? Was it you? Was it you and your partners?
So at the beginning of 2020, I came up with the idea of doing this. And to be fair,
Okay.
back in 2002, I actually considered starting a similar medical tourism company focused on plastic surgery. with my uncle who has a hospital in Manzanillo. But then I started working at Google and I'm like, this Google thing has legs. I think I'm going to go focus on Google right now. But the advances in tech and telemedicine just make so much of this just more possible. Look,
Yeah.
80% of consults that historically have been done in person can actually be done via telemedicine. And there are a lot of companies that have proven that out. And so by offering this service, we're like, well, we suddenly unlock well over 100,000 new physicians to a population that just doesn't have access to physicians. So in some ways, it's almost like a no-duh opportunity. The intricacies of how to do it, I think, is where we've been able to differentiate and really get this off the ground fast.
The fascinating part to me, just as an observer, thinking about healthcare in the U.S. as a consumer, right? So you're tackling so much of the easy consults, but then you do have that next layer, that escalation layer built into it, so that the people who need deeper care follow on local prescriptions, different things, like maybe even emergency service. Like you have that next level of support as well in their states.
We have that, but look, about 14% of our consults, even the ones that start and end with a physician in Mexico or the health coach in Mexico, would have ended up in the emergency room. So after every consult, we ask like, well, how happy were you with your health coach? What would you have done if you didn't have access to MiSalud? And about 13-14% would have ended up in the emergency room. And Oof. So, if you think about the average emergency room visit is about $3,000 to $4,000. I mean, that's pretty significant. And it's significant for the individual and it's significant for the employer, especially if it's an employer provided health plan.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, talk about like, hey, we're fixing the system by essentially preempting the need to have people wind up in the system. I mean, that's good for not only the patients, but it's good for the overall kind of the larger economic argument.
Almost 100% of the MiSalud members also have access to insurance. So a lot of people usually say, oh, this is for people who are undocumented in the US, people who aren't in the system. And I'm like, no, the vast majority of them have employer-provided health plans, but they may either not sign up for them, or if they do, the copays are too high. They can't get scheduled to see a physician, a primary care physician, for 3 to 4 months out. And then that cultural connection, right? We have this person who was trying to control her weight and she had an issue with diabetes. And she's like, I went to the doctor and the doctor told me that I just need to stop eating bread. So I'm like, okay. So she's like, I haven't had a concha. I haven't had like a sandwich in months. But my diabetes is only getting worse. I'm like, well, how many tortillas and tacos do you eat a day? And she's like, well, I don't know, 8 to 10. What's normal? It's like, well, that's bread.
Right.
And like sometimes if you're not culturally attuned, you're going to miss that.
Of course. Wow. You mentioned it. You just kind of referred to it. There's a little bit of, I want to pull on this thread of kind of the audience that you serve. I noticed as you guys launched and as I would see content on social media, right, a lot of the earliest days, it sounds like it's expanding now as far as the customers and client companies and organizations that you serve. But a lot of the early days was working with what we would call, right, like labor forces, right, like field laborers or trades, right? And so to me, I'm kind of curious, right, like that obviously has a high proportion of undocumented workers or people who maybe aren't going to get healthcare because they're afraid of being involved in the system, so to speak, right? Or putting themselves out there. But you guys have kind of cracked that nut. Like you have figured out how to cross that cultural fear in a way that is making you like a preferred alternative. You just said some of these or a lot of these members of the MiSalud community have healthcare options available to them that they're choosing not to use, but they're choosing to use MiSalud. Like, talk about that a little bit further if you can, because that's a unique audience, and obviously we're going to talk a little bit more about it. It's a highly politicized part of our community here in the United States, unfortunately, for a bunch of bad reasons, right? But like, you're saying, like, let's go past all that and let's deliver services to the people who need the care, regardless of status and all these different things.
Yeah, we definitely want to help all people. And our vision for MiSalud is we're going after the $5 trillion healthcare industry. Like that's what we're going after. We have started with the Hispanic community, because it's close to home. My parents were migrant field workers, and I still remember when my dad broke his foot, running up and down a ladder picking apples. We waited that month and a half before he got medical attention, and he got medical attention when we were back in our village in Mexico. That's when he was able to afford healthcare. So we want to offer a solution for all of those people, but we believe that this healthcare model can work for everybody.
Yeah, clearly.
Today about a quarter of our consults are already 100% in English. We have populations that we serve in the northern Central Valley of California that are Punjabi Indians, so they don't speak Spanish.
Right.
And they're interacting with the platform in English. We have a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Latinos in Texas who only speak English, whose families have been here for almost, maybe centuries, right? So we think that this platform can and should be used by everybody because we increase access and we lower costs. Today, It's mostly virtual. So typically when we work with an employer, we'll go on site to do kind of an onboarding, and we'll get initial biometrics, do a blood draw, and then, understand people's initial health state and then put them into programs. And sometimes it's, diabetes care, sometimes it's, hypertension care, sometimes it's a smoking cessation program that's between physical health and mental health. And then they constantly use a platform. And because of that, most digital platforms that are out there get single digit to low double digit engagement. We get about 90% of the employee population that signs up, and about 50% stay constantly engaged with the platform.
Uses it.
Which in turn allows us to deliver significantly better health outcomes.
Of course. It's funny. Essentially what I'm learning for the first time is essentially you're proofing the larger case, the $5 trillion healthcare fix case, inside of this unique audience, this unique community that you had an affinity for and an understanding of, right? And where there was a clear, maybe more pressing need, and then therefore like a more responsive opportunity for you guys.
And receptiveness,
if we
right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's actually the better. That's the better word, right? It's like there. So you knew you had a pressing need, and then there was a greater receptiveness, which is now proven out, right, in your numbers. But really, as you say it, it's so clear to me as I'm listening. It's like, hey, maybe the medical establishment or the private capital industry has been saying like, we could solve healthcare, we could provide better care, we could leverage outsourced offshore people in other locations, but haven't garnered enough critical mass, like enough traction. You're proving the case with higher adoption rates and user rates, usefulness rates inside of this community, which then is just going to make it super obvious to everybody. Like, well, if it could work with them, it would obviously work for them, and it would work for them, and it would work for them, and it would work for them. I mean, this is like a little Russian nesting egg or nesting doll, right? Like, there's the market of what MiSalud is doing in the beginning, but the truth is, if you pull it out, as I'm hearing it, if I'm hearing it correctly, please tell me if I'm not, like that this becomes the proof case for why couldn't somebody in New Hampshire who works at an insurance at the DMV or at a white collar job, why couldn't they get healthcare provided 90% of the time consult wise by these doctors who are in Mexico or in other countries or in other languages?
Look, today over 3 million Americans already go mostly to Mexico for medical tourism. A lot of it is dentistry, some of it's cosmetic, and then a lot of it's a lot of other care. And this was, what was it? About 6 months ago, a friend of mine whose brother also worked at Google, guy that is doing very well for himself, multimillionaire. And this woman that I know said, hey, can you give me any tips of restaurants in Guadalajara? I'm like, yeah. I'm in Puerto Vallarta right now. Like, are you around? Like, come and visit. She's like, no, my brother, long story. I'm like, oh, I'd love to hear the long story. She's like, so my brother wanted to see this ophthalmologist in Chicago. And the insurance, it was a big deal. And then eventually it was going to be 8 months before the ophthalmologist would see this guy. He's like, oh my God, I need to see the ophthalmologist like now. He had something pretty serious. And so he did a little bit of research, and he found that this ophthalmologist had done some work with an ophthalmologist that was based out of Guadalajara. So he's like, let me reach out to this person in Guadalajara. And so he reaches out to this person in Guadalajara, and the ophthalmologist is like, hey, you want to come down? I'll see you next week. And went down there on a Tuesday, and then on that Thursday, he was being operated on. And before he flew down, he contacted his insurance, and and he told his insurance, like, hey, would you be willing to cover this? They're like, you can fly first class. Because the cost was so much lower than what would have cost in Chicago. And this would have been 8 to 9 months later, that the insurance company was like, yes, go and do it. And that's the thing, like the insurance industry, the medical industry already has centers of excellence around the world, in Thailand, in Turkey, where they're perfectly fine. If you're willing to go get a procedure somewhere else, they will cover it. And so, but today it's still very much a cottage industry. And I
don't know that most people knew that.
Most people don't know that.
I mean, because we paint inside of the system here in the U.S., like we paint the insurance company as the villains across the board, right? It's all broken because it's them. And then how we've legislatively layered everything around that. But here you are, like I was fully waiting for you to tell that story and have the punchline be, and they said, no, you can't get it in Mexico. Like they were literally like, please and thank you. Like, oh, you're going to go get this and it's going to have that much less risk for us and less expense. Like, go for it. Holy cow.
And that's the thing, right? Like most people who are insured and get hurt while they're traveling abroad and they get medical care, they can actually file those claims and get reimbursed. And so there's already a model within the existing system to do this. I just feel it's been very niche-y and very much a cottage industry. And so we think that under the MiSalud umbrella, at least right now for North America, we can integrate the North American healthcare system in the same way that manufacturing has been integrated, the same way that we did our part integrating the technology industry across the Americas.
Wow. I'm blown away in the most positive way. This is awesome. So do me a favor now, you got me super excited about like the next 20 years of MiSalud. What does it look like? What's the progression from here to where it's going?
So on the digital platform, we continue to add new programs. So we started with physical health, we added mental health. We've added a lot of these programs around those two big pillars. We're adding dentistry, we're adding pediatrics, we're adding women's health. And I would like in the next 24 months for us to have a physical presence in Mexico. And I don't know if it's, we're going to ride the trend of dentistry across the border because that's typically what people end up paying the most out of pocket. Or we'll do something bigger back in Guadalajara. But we would like to have not just this digital or hybrid approach when we go on site and kick off a relationship, but actually have full care or have the ability to offer full care across North America.
It seems like it'd be a natural extension, right? A MiSalud Health clinic and conference center.
And wellness
right?
center. Yeah,
wellness center,
all of these new services like Function Health, where they do full MRIs and they're really trying to be preventative.
Right.
But here it's all about concierge medicine. It's incredibly expensive. Like you go on the Function Health website and it's like $25,000 or $15,000 where you pay out of pocket. There are very few people who would be able to do that. But we may be able to do it for $1,500, $2,500 in Mexico. And so then you're able to open the aperture and make it available to a lot more people.
I mean, and if you proof the case over enough people there, you might actually be able to convince some part of the insurance industry to say, wait, okay, preventative concierge, we used to say, no, we're not going to pay for that because it's too high end. Oh, but now these guys have brought the cost structure down and it's there. So yeah, go ahead, fly first class for your preventative mammograms every year. Like we'll pay for that.
And we're already, the thing is, some people have asked me, it's like, well, are the physicians going to be up in arms around this? Is the insurance industry is going to be up in arms? Like, no, everybody wants to increase access and lower cost. Like there isn't anybody in the healthcare industry that doesn't say like, "Eeh, yeah, we have a lot of work to do." And so it's been really nice. Honestly, I feel like in every conversation, no one says, no, you can't do that. That's not the way things are done. I think everybody's like, let's figure out how we can work together.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io. Amazing. And again, to have your proof audience, this MVP version of it in these early years, be a community also that you have a deep affinity for and a deep understanding of, and to be able to like truly providing a breakthrough opportunity for care for them, which that is just going to make the story later better, right? When you're serving millions and millions of average Americans of all types and different shapes and sizes and colors and ethnicities and whatnot, but you can always point back to the fact that it was MiSalud Health and it was rooted here. That's powerful.
Well, Rob, you've known me for a long time. I'm a big fan of this idea of building businesses that do well and do good at the same time. And when we were at Wiseline, we opened up Wiseline Academy. There were free courses. We had courses where Wiseliners would teach underprivileged girls math so that we could fast track them into software development. And there was this idea that as a company, we were doing well, but we were also doing good on the side because we had great people. Here, like embedded in what we do is making people healthier.
Oh, I mean, incredible, right? That's awesome. Good for you. Purpose, profit, the whole way it's supposed to work, right? Very intentional. All right. Speaking of that, you teased me into your great podcast guest. You just teased me into the segue of the next question, right? So beyond the work with MiSalud, I would love, because I have some time with you here. Like I want to talk kind of Mexico entrepreneurial, right? I want to talk the Mexico entrepreneurial economy. I want to talk North America for a little bit, and there literally is no one better to talk to this stuff about than with you. So I've got kind of a couple of questions, but the one that is always eating at me, right? What was it that, other than just, again, your personal relationships and your own origin story, like what was it to you that made you see like that cross-border talent potential opportunity that made you become such a loud, proud advocate of this? It is one of the reasons we're friends. We do share that belief, but I'm coming at it from the outside and appreciating it now fully. You've lived it. But like, what was it so early? Because you had to have been so early at such a point that most people thought you were nuts, right? That like, you can't build software development organizations in Mexico. Like that's absurd. What are you talking about, right? Like there is cross-border. That's nonsense. Like, but I mean, you saw something a long time ago that is now the norm. How did that happen, and what did you see?
So a couple of things. I knew about the term Silicon Valley before I knew Silicon Valley existed. And that's because my parents grew up in this little village just outside of Guadalajara, which meant that one would fly in and out of Guadalajara, which is one of the major cities in Mexico. And then we would drive at that time about 3 hours to my parents' village. But on the way in, you would pass by the Siemens plant. And just outside of the Siemens plant, it said Guadalajara, Mexico's Silicon Valley.
Ah, okay.
And so I grew up I'm like, oh, Mexico, Silicon Valley. I'm like, what is Silicon Valley? And then obviously, eventually I learned about it, and eventually I ended up in the Silicon Valley to go to school. But I didn't really connect like, all right, we're gonna go invest in the Mexican Silicon Valley until 2009. So summer of 2009, we're building Uyala. We were about to raise a funding round. We're like, all right, the company's going to survive. But if we're receiving investment, that means a bunch of other companies are going to start to receive investment. And if it had been difficult to hire and retain talent during the financial crisis, it was going to become impossible once the VCs started writing checks again. So like, we need to set up an R&D center outside of the Silicon Valley. And so we hired this consultant, someone we had worked with at Google, who had worked at McKinsey. And we're like, all right, go find us an R&D center where we can set up. And we assumed he'd come back, India, China, Ukraine, maybe Argentina, because Argentina had Mercado Libre and a couple of other success stories. And he came back and he's like, you know what? Mexico's really interesting. And initially, I questioned Mexico. And I know you've heard me mention this story. Like, my parents left Mexico, right? Like, they pursued the American dream in the US because they felt that, like Trump used to say, Mexico's corrupt, Mexico's dangerous, there's zero upward mobility in Mexico. That's how I grew up. Mexico, loved Mexico, had family there, the beaches are fantastic, but I never thought of setting up an R&D center there. But this guy had zero connection to Mexico. He's from like Massachusetts. I don't think he had ever been to Mexico, but he showed us the numbers. And, at the time, Mexico was graduating about 60,000 engineers a year. We're like, all right, let's go and interview. And so we went down to Mexico. We interviewed about 15 engineers, and the 15 engineers, there were 8 that our CTO, who again I think got his passport just to be able to go to Mexico, first time ever. He's like, oh, let's bring them back to the Silicon Valley. I'm like, no, you're missing the point. Like, there's something here. But then we waited about a year, and it wasn't until we met Adalberto Flores and Vidal Gonzalez, who were entrepreneurs from Guadalajara, Mexico. They were trying to raise capital for their startup in the Silicon Valley. I brought them on board to work on a project because they were having a difficult time raising capital. I'm like, look, the VCs, they're kind of sheep. They don't know about Tec de Monterrey or Liteso in Guadalajara. So at least you'll have Uyala on your CV, and maybe that'll help. And after they did this project, I'm like, you guys are amazing. I'm like, this idea that you have is probably never going to go anywhere, but how would you like to be entrepreneurs at Uyala by setting up our operations in Guadalajara? And they ended up going for it. And they went down to Guadalajara and set up operations. But I still remember, back to your point around this was fairly new. When we told the board that we were going to open something in Guadalajara, they were really excited that we were setting something up in mainland Europe, in Guadalajara, Spain, because we were in the UK, and they're like, oh, Brexit's probably going to happen sometime in the future. I'm like, no, Guadalajara, Mexico. And their question was, are there engineers in Mexico?
Same thing.
But you know what? 4 years later, when we started Wiseline and we grew, we helped grow the ecosystem, and we were very, very proud and bullish and supportive of other companies that were investing in Guadalajara. That was no longer a question. 100% of our engineers, when we started Wiseline, 4 years after we opened the operations for Uyala in Guadalajara, were in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Wow. That's incredible. And so much of some of the threads of things you said, both about yourself and then about the others that were involved with you at the time, like hearkening back, I remember going to give a speech in Tijuana, like for the first time in this kind of era of my life, like 2015. And I had happened to have been like a week and a half before at Berkeley, where my daughter was at school, and like, I'm single dad. I'm like hanging out with the kids and all that, And I'm like, man, I love Berkeley. The kids are so smart, like your guys at Stanford, right? They're like, you can't help but be hopeful about the future when you interact with bright, ambitious, aspirational young people. And then I'm down there giving this speech, and I give like the one speech invitation turns into like 4 speeches that week at like 3 different university campuses around Tijuana and Baja. And each of them is, of course, they bring the gringo speaker in, so they fill the room, they make the kids go to sit through the speech, right? And there's like a couple hundred kids in each one of these. And then I'm talking to them, and I'm talking to the people and their professors afterwards, and they're all engineering students. right? And I'm like, wait, so hold on. You mean that like 400 kids this morning, they were all engineering students, and then these 250, and then those 200 this afternoon, and then like those 90 kids that this evening were all like, so basically I just spoke in front of like, 750 engineering students at college. And I'm talking to the kids, and I couldn't avoid the feeling, overwhelming feeling, sitting back in the hotel the second night by myself and thinking like, what's the difference between these kids and the kids that are hanging around my daughter at Berkeley? Like, I'm like opportunity, circumstance, where they were born, what, all that kind of stuff. And I'm, not direct correlations between Berkeley and Stanford and SETIs, right? But like, hey, like in broad terms, I was blown away by it, almost embarrassingly, right? Like, what have I been doing? I'm behind under a rock, like to not appreciate that this was true. Just not even that there was an opportunity, but just that it was there.
And look, no one should judge you for that. I felt the same way. Like, one is a product of their experience, and yes, working at Google, we were very elitist, right? Like there were 5 schools that we hired from, maybe 7, right? And if you didn't come from those schools, well, tough luck. I hate to say it, but once we started Uyala, we had the same hiring practice, and so it takes these like moments for you to break out. And what we learned, and what it should be obvious, is that talent is evenly distributed around the world across populations. What isn't are opportunities and experience. And so 100%. We felt, and that's why we started Startup GDL with Cindy, because we felt that if we bring more tech companies into the region, we're going to bring companies that obviously pay well, that maybe give stock options, but more importantly, that have a different way of working, right?
Different
as you know, being in California, you kind of feel like, oh, well, the rest of the U.S. is like that. But most of the world's very hierarchical.
Yes.
They crap all over you for 20, 25 years, and then you get into like mid management, and then it's your turn to like crap all over the young kids. And but in tech companies, or at least Silicon Valley companies, it's a meritocracy. It's about being collaborative. It's about being creative. It's about growing fast. And if the company does well, you will do well as well. And that's why we started GDL, bring more of those companies. We didn't want to monopolize the talent. And we felt that we couldn't do it on our own. So we needed a community to be able to really tap into this talent and bring that opportunity and experience.
Yeah. We've touched on it on the fringes of this stuff. It's endemic to what we're talking about, right? Politicians come and go, political movements come and go, political parties come and go. Like, we know all that changes. We're living in this crazy time of uncertainty and chaos, which is not good for anybody in any way. But within sometimes chaos comes like crazy long-term opportunities, right? And you've defined your career in some ways by this. So like, talk to me now looking forward, talking not just about MiSalud, not just about Wiseline, but about this broader theme that we've just been expanding upon. Like, how do we see the next 10, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, right, of opportunities between Mexico and the U.S., either maybe together, part of the question, and maybe also independent from one another?
So I think, demographics lead economics. And if it weren't for immigration, the U.S. would have a declining population, right?
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago. Like during the COVID years, the U.S. population actually shrunk by 80,000, right? Because immigration pretty much stopped, which is a problem. And if we think about what is America, right? Like, America is, the U.S. is mobility. Like, you had people in these 13 colonies that thought of it as manifest destiny, like move west, right? They saw opportunity. And then when there was crises, like during the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, Grapes of Wrath, you had people who moved from Oklahoma to California. And I feel like we have this opportunity, if we really embrace it and embrace North America to start with as a region. Like, yeah, businesses are here to increase shareholder value. And if a plant moves to Mexico that was in Detroit, like you should be willing to move to Mexico. That's where the jobs went, right? And I think we as a region should really embrace that. And embracing this entire economic region, I think will make us stronger. Mexico has a younger population. They have a lower cost of living.
Right.
There are, if we think about alternative energy, they have vast deserts where we could have solar farms. And if Mexico is strong, if Canada is strong, the US state is safer and stronger. And so I'm a big believer in the integration of North America. I'm a big believer in the Latinification of the US. And you're already starting to see a lot of Mexican brands that are benefiting from this. I recently joined the board of PISA, which is one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world, largest in Latin America, and they have this product called Electrolyte. And Electrolyte is a competitor to Powerade and Gatorade, and it's already number 3 in the world. And in the US, you also have Topo Chico and you have Tajín, and you have all of these brands that are emerging in the US that are going to be incredibly powerful. And so I just think there's so much opportunity there. And as consumers, we're going to embrace that. As producers and manufacturers in Mexico, they should be looking at the US Hispanic population. It is the largest Hispanic economy in the world, right? It's bigger than Spain, it's bigger than Mexico, it's bigger than Argentina. It is $4 trillion. So I just think it's inevitable. And what may seem novel right now that we're doing with MiSalud, I just think is going to become more obvious and more companies are going to do it.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. Running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com. Yeah, and you've got such a healthy, which I appreciate because I'm a long view guy as well. I'm one of those. I think in terms of things that will far outlast me. Now I have a 6-month-old grandson. I think about the world that he'll be living in when he's my age, right? And people are always like, yeah, but Rob, you'll be long dead by then. I'm like, yeah, but that's the whole point. The point isn't just to think about the opportunities or the solutions to the things that I've got left in my 25 or 30 years of life. Like the thing is to think about what the world would be like and then put the seeds in now, right? To position ourselves for those greater truths that are inevitable, as you say. I love that. Demographics leads economics. I wish a lot more of our elected officials appreciated that in the United States, because that's a fundamental truth right there. You couple more questions before we get to our last segment. We talked about it earlier, this idea of merging purposefulness and profit, of the doing good business while doing good. It's hallmark to you and everything you've done. When you meet young or early entrepreneurs, not necessarily young or old, but just early entrepreneurs, right, that are new as they navigate their journey, how do you advise them, or how do you mentor them, give them advice about that, about how to find product opportunity and purposefulness?
I think it's self-selecting, right? I think I don't necessarily find that entrepreneurs are come to the world thinking that they do want to make the world a better place. I think that they may identify a problem that they want to solve. I think they may identify an opportunity that will make them rich. But I think the forms, the way they do it is important. And I think that that's also where you think about like people's morals, people's ethics. And while I will meet with a lot of entrepreneurs, I do ask key questions. And if I don't feel their heart is in the right place, then I'm going to invest less time with them. But I want to be very clear, right? For me, growing up poor in an immigrant family, my idea of business was what I saw on TV. And I grew up thinking that the business world was that of Wall Street. Greed is good. For someone to get ahead
Right.
and win,
Yes.
someone has to lose. And it wasn't until I got to Google that I saw that at least my time at Google, people can argue that it's a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
place now.
Fair enough.
But at my time in Google, Google always put doing the right thing ahead of profit. There were a lot of decisions that the company could have made or executed on that would have made them a lot more money, but would have hurt the user experience, would have hurt employees. And Google and its executives always erred on the side of doing the right thing, and maybe it goes back to the early employees and what was it? Don't be evil.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. The old, yeah.
and so that taught me that it is possible to do well and do good. And I think one needs to lead by example. That experience taught me, and hopefully my experience will teach other entrepreneurs, and they'll aspire to be that.
Yeah. No, it's like you said, it's almost self-selective in some ways, right?
Now
Like,
that becomes the culture, right? Like
yeah.
that'd be fantastic if that were the culture of entrepreneurship.
Right. And the people who aspire to live and build businesses that way will be drawn to people like you, again, because you led by example, not necessarily because of your words, but like because this is how you've carried yourself. This is, oh, look at how he's done it. Like, I want to do it like that. And they'll be drawn to you. And then you can dispense great advice because it'll be impactful. And the people that won't, you still may stumble across some of them sometimes, like you say, but you're able to discern them just like I am. Like, okay, I'll answer your question, but I'm moving on to the next guy, right? Because you just know that there's not a return there for that moment, which is an admirable way to do it. All right, so I'm curious. We've talked about a ton. I mean, healthcare and solving healthcare in the U.S. aside, $5 trillion problem, right? $5 trillion opportunity. Also, just one of our just absolutely bedeviling problems in our society. So I love that that's your focus for now. But I am curious, because I'm a curious person, and I think you are as well. What else triggers your curiosity? Like, you're a young guy still. You're going to work on 6 other things between now and the day you die, post MiSalud. Like, what else has got your attention and kind of triggers your curiosity right now as far as challenges and opportunities in society that you might someday decide to poke your finger into?
I think robotics is really interesting right now. And I've been very interested about it for the last 24 months. Before we started the podcast, we were chatting about how I got back into the operator seat with MiSalud. And if I didn't go out and start a fund, I was thinking about a robotics company.
Interesting. Now, I'm not a robotics guy, so I'm going to ask a stupid question like robotics, just the whole concept of roboticizing things, or robotics in particular applications get your attention?
So I may sound like a Luddite here, but I do believe that this is going to be the first time when, in 30 or 40 years, humans may not be doing any work, because it'll just be a lot more efficient for robots that are super intelligent to be doing it. And maybe we'll find other things for humans to do. Or maybe Neuralink will become, and we will finally, merge with robots. But I think robotics right now is very interesting. And one of the ideas that I had, I think, the world is, you have these robots and these robot companies that are selling to logistics companies or big e-commerce companies that are in the warehouse moving around. But generally, the world is built for humans. And so I believe that the humanoid robot is probably going to be one of the more interesting things. And in the same way that you have body shops that you take your or mechanics that you take your car to, I think that there are going to be opportunities for mechanics, for robots. I think that there's a really interesting aftermarket or customization type of industry for, like, the robot that's going to be working in the fields is very different than the robot that's going to be working at McDonald's or at In-N-Out. And so you're going to need different firmware, you're going to need different software, you're going to need, instead of, this suction cup hand that picks up a strawberry perfectly, you're going to need one that maybe just has a spatula or built in. And so I thought that entire supply chain is pretty interesting as we continue to move forward within robotics. So I thought about something in that area.
That's fascinating.
But look, the entire world is changing right now, and I've always said that I will stay active and doing things as long as the industry will have me.
I suspect the industry's probably going to be happy to have you as long as you want to do this.
I don't know.
There'll be
a whole world out there.
So somebody will be happy to roll out like 87-year-old Bismarck into their board meeting or their brainstorming session with their young engineers, right? That I don't doubt at all. All right, last question. This is just a question of total personal privilege, because I want us to have a chance before we finish up to just talk about, wax poetically about a place that we both love, right? So I'm sitting here in Los Angeles. You're up in the Bay Area right now. Both cities, and frankly, our whole state of California, has like a unique relationship, a special relationship with Guadalajara, right? Like, what is it? Like, what is the dynamic? What is it so special between Guadalajara and Southern California and just California as a whole?
After Mexico City, Los Angeles has the second highest population of Mexicans. Not Mexican Americans, not Mexican heritage, but Mexicans, right? It's Mexico City, then Los Angeles.
I always say we would be the second biggest city in Mexico.
That's right. And this was Mexico, right?
Right. Exactly.
This was Mexico. And so and 45% of the population in California is Hispanic. The vast majority of those are Mexican, like 80% of those are Mexican. And so you just can't help but feel comfortable being in Mexico if you've been in California, right? Culturally, we're just very connected. Genetically, we're very connected, and it is also true of most of the southern states. Actually, New Mexico has a higher concentration of Hispanics as the state population than California.
And New Mexico, Texas have like their history with areas of like Monterrey, other part of the northern border states, Chihuahua. But for me, you'll laugh, you may find this little nugget fascinating. So I had a friend, a gentleman on the podcast a year and a half ago or so, Eric Aid. Eric, at one point, he works in the innovation space here in Southern California, the venture space. At one point, Eric worked for Mayor Garcetti, and Eric and his team were actually some of the people who were responsible for negotiating the deal with Guadalajara, broad air quotes, to create the daily flights between Guadalajara and LAX, right? And so I've often teased him. I'm like, you're the gringo that's responsible for this pipeline of Tapatíos because I think there are more Guadalajarans like in Los Angeles than there are Mexicans from any other place.
No, yeah,
like it's
in California.
Everybody I meet, it seems like they're from the West Coast, right, of Mexico, the Guadalajara, Baja area. And so I was just curious if you had any feelings about it.
I need to look into it, but because
I don't run into like Mexico City people, right? I don't run into Mexico City, and I get it, time zones, but that's not that big a deal. But like Guadalajara, it's like a pipeline between Guadalajara and California.
You know what? I think it probably goes back, and it was probably someone's relationship to a local governor with the Bracero program back in the 1940s through the early 1960s that created these pathways between Jalisco and California. Because like my mom talks about her dad was the mayor of their little village in Juchitlan, and the governor would be given a certain number of Bracero permits, and then they would get fanned out to the mayors, to the different municipalities. And then the municipalities would be the ones that would be responsible for giving them to different people to have the ability to come to the US. And so maybe there were just certain governors, and we'd have to look into it, or certain states that just didn't have that
Yeah.
access. Um, it could also be that no, we should look into it. We should look into it.
Yeah, I'm a history nerd, and I'm always fascinated with, especially with these cross-cultural issues that you and I live so deeply. And I'm always like, man, like Guadalajara people come to town and they're like, hey, I've never been to LA before. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. Literally, there are thousands and thousands of you around the neighborhoods. Like I'll call 5 of my Guadalajara friends that live here now, and they'll all take you out, right? So it's amazing. It's just
And I'm sure if we dig into it, it will have come out that there were a handful of people that were responsible for that connection. Like, do you know why Guadalajara became Mexico's Silicon Valley?
no, I mean, other than Siemens putting up that sign, apparently.
No. So the reason is the person who was the consul general, an American from the U.S., when he was a consul general for the U.S. based out of the consulate in Guadalajara, he married a Mexican woman, became a local pillar, and he was really good friends with an executive at IBM. And when IBM was thinking about setting up a manufacturing, he convinced them to set up IBM in Guadalajara back in the 1960s. And that person really started to, I mean, maybe it would have taken
Right.
off without that. But because IBM,
Yeah, but
Big Blue was there, it made it so much more obvious for other companies to set up manufacturing in Guadalajara. That eventually became chip
oh,
design, that has
100%.
now become software.
As we used to, as old guys like you and I know, right? We used to have that saying, like, nobody ever gets shot for buying IBM. Boy, did I sell against that phrase for a lot of my early career back in the 80s and 90s. All right, last question before we get you out of here. And I'm so grateful for your time and your energy. As I said when we began, sometimes these conversations are just like two friends talking about stuff they love to talk about. But I do really believe with the conversation about MiSalud, we unpacked kind of like a hugely important, how do we think more entrepreneurially about healthcare and health delivery in North America? And that in and of itself is a home run. So I'm grateful for that. But last question, this is kind of like a tips and advice question. So a little bit more actionable, maybe a bullet point or two. For someone who wants to build a cross-border, like a remote or distributed multicultural company, right? So some young entrepreneur in Mexico who wants to build in California or vice versa, someone in Silicon Valley who says, man, I think I could benefit by hiring and building talent in Guadalajara, in Mexico, and Jalisco, wherever. What are 3 things that person needs to get right from day one?
So I think first, you have to go work at a company that's done it. Because this is, especially in Mexico, it's still very much a people-driven business. And so you're going to need to know politicians. You're going to need to know people in the ecosystem. And there are so many people that want to kind of come in to Mexico. Some of them may just be like tech tourists versus people who actually want to invest in the community. I think you want to differentiate yourself. And so use another platform, a company that's already doing business in Mexico, to just get a lay of the land and spend some real time in Mexico and knowing those key people. I think second would probably be understand what your value proposition is going to be. Like, what are you going to bring to the community that is really going to differentiate yourself? Because the reality is, GDP per capita in Mexico is about $14,000. Starting salary of an engineer at any one of these tech companies is probably $28,000. So right off the bat, you're already going to be paying people really well. And so it's going to have to be more than just cash that's going to attract the talent. And so you really need to understand that value proposition. And the third one, I guess I would say, is meet Cindy Blanco.
That's literal mic drop. If I would pick up my microphone, but Deanna would get mad at me. Like, mic drop. There we go. We worked Cindy into this somehow. Yeah. I love it. That was awesome, buddy. This is a pleasure. Thank you. How do people listening find, follow, connect with MiSalud Health and/or you online? Are there websites, email addresses, social? Where do we go?
MiSaludHealth.com. I'm on LinkedIn, so Bismarck Lepe. There's only one.
There's
And
literally only one.
you can also email me at bismarck at misalud.com.
I love it. This is a pleasure. Muchas gracias, mi amigo.
Todo placer.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.